When I was young, I hated maths. How many of you feel me? And it didn't help growing up at a time when you were young and you met an adult and they asked you, what did you get in maths? And as a guy, you are expected to be good in maths. The girls, they got away with it. But as a guy, you had to be good in maths. Because maths then led you to physics, chemistry, biology, and then to seemingly manly careers like engineering, medicine, architecture, politics. I wasn't good at maths. I struggled. And then I realized that I wouldn't get in any of those careers. But somehow, the legal profession appealed to me. And it wasn't because lawyers looked always so smart, and they were so clever, they were so eloquent, and they made lots of money. No, it was because there was no maths required. And so, I decided I was going to be a lawyer. And when I was young, I don't know if any of you remember those days of black and white TV. There was a show called Crown Court. And I watched it diligently, listening to the lawyers, listening to the cross-examination, trying to figure out what was going to be the verdict. While everybody else watched other intellectually challenging shows, like The Three Stooges, Kivunja Mbavu, I watched Crown Court. You see, now it had become personal. I had to prove to all those people who thought that you wouldn't make it if you were not good in maths, that you could. And so I went to school, I went to the university, and then, unfortunately, when I got to the School of Law, I realized that I couldn't escape maths. Because at the School of Law, you have to do a basic accountancy course. And so there I was, grappling with this maths. It was a basic accounting course, but it was not easy. And you ask any lawyer, they'll tell you, School of Law, accounts. So I sat the exam, and let me say, I didn't sit it just once. And when I finally passed, none other than the principal of the School of Law took me out for drinks and nyama choma to celebrate. So anyway, I got into the profession, and as a young lawyer, I used to go to court, and I'd see all these smart lawyers in their expensive suits, big briefcases. They pull out Mont Blanc pens and they jotted on their diaries. And I said, yes, this is good. This is good business. I'm in the right place. But as I went on in the profession, I got to learn that there are times when you do some of those cases, and there are one or two cases that you will do that make you realize that it's not just about business, it's personal. And you realize then that you made the right choice in whatever it is that you did. And for me, I dealt with a number of those cases, but I'll tell you just about two of them. Now, the first one involved a gentleman called Peter. Peter was a nice man. He was short, stocky, well-mannered, easygoing. He had a wife and 4 children, and he worked for one of our parastatals here in Nairobi. He wasn't very well paid, but he was fortunate because he had a mortgage scheme. And he lived in a rented house in Umoja Estate. So every morning as he rode the bus to work, he would see this beautifully constructed house, which he dreamt of owning. And then one day, he saw a for sale sign on it. So he took his wife to the house, and they met the couple who was selling it. And after numerous conversations, a deal was struck. And so Peter quickly got a mortgage and paid for the house. And in so doing, the house which was on loan was redeemed, and the couple were now living in a loan-free house. But unfortunately, their intention was not to sell the house. It was to clear their loan. Because as soon as their loan was cleared, the couple's wife went to court, and she filed a court case claiming, 1, that she was estranged from her husband, 2, that he wanted to throw her out her together with Peter. So she went to court and she got an injunction. I mean, for her, it was such an emotional case. And right there, Peter was locked out of a house that he had purchased. So he found himself in a situation where he was paying a mortgage and he was paying rent for the house that he was living in. He was distressed, of course. And in fact, as we sat together, pondering on what to do, I realized this was one of those cases that was not just about business, it was personal. Now, the unfortunate thing is that because it was a fairly new case, it took very long for that case to be confirmed for hearing. So for 3 long years, we waited. We would go to court and we were told, come next year. There are too many cases. And Peter would get even more and more distressed. In fact, he transformed me into a counselor, and I would be counseling him in my office, except that I didn't have a couch. Anyway, one day, Peter's case was finally confirmed for hearing. And so we prepared ourselves. He came to the office with his wife, and we got ready, and we went to court. We marched in victoriously, ready to do battle. And you can imagine the scene in court. Many lawyers, many cases being called out, and ours was really down on the list, and we waited. Finally, our case was called out. And the lady who had filed the case was nowhere to be seen. Her lawyer was nowhere to be seen. This was unbelievable. We were ready to do battle, but they were not there. So when I was called out, I came forth proudly and I said, yes, I'm present, and so is Peter. We are ready to proceed with the case. But what do you want to do in the absence of the plaintiff? You see, this case was personal. We want it dismissed. And it was dismissed, just like that. After 3 agonizing years of waiting for the case to be heard, without even much of a fight, Peter got his house back. And that's when we realized that this was personal. It was not just about business. And as we walked out of the court, we saw the lady running to court together with her lawyer. Apparently, they had gone to the wrong court. So I realized when it is personal, these are the sorts of things that happened. But the other case, which really is unforgettable and a bit sad, is a case about a client of mine called James. Now, James was a banker, and he personified the real image of a banker. He's a tall, bespectacled, slim, very astute-looking man. He was very businesslike in his appearance. And James was a senior manager in the bank. He had a lot of businesses on the side, including farming. Now, one Saturday morning, James's wife was driving their pickup up country. And in the back, she was carrying their niece. James's niece lived with them. She was about 27-year-old, and she went to college in the city. But she used to visit her family up country. So as they drove along Thika Road, the weather got really bad. It was raining. And the storm increased and the wind got so heavy, she could barely see the road. Unfortunately, as a result of poor visibility, the car rolled. And it rolled and rolled. And finally, when it got to a stop, the people had perished. All except James's niece, who's called Nancy. Now, Nancy's injuries were so severe that she had to have her leg amputated. It was tragic for James. He had to deal with burying his wife and the others who had perished in the accident. But he also had to pay Nancy's fees, medical expenses, and even the cost of buying her a false leg. Now, one day, I don't know if any of you have ever met or heard of people called ambulance chasers. They caught up with this young girl called Nancy, and they told her that if she filed a claim in court, she would make a lot of money because she was young and she was so badly injured. And she thought about it and bought the idea. But unfortunately for her to succeed in her claim, she would have to sue her uncle, James. And the other unfortunate thing is that because she was a passenger in a pickup, the insurance did not cover her. So as a result, if she filed a claim, James would have to pay it from his personal resources. She agonized, but decided she was going to claim. It was not business, for her it was also personal. So she filed the claim. And I remember sitting in my office with James, agonizing over what to do. Here he was with the court papers. We had to defend this case. How are we going to defend it? There were no witnesses. The only witness was Nancy, who was determined to get her pound of flesh. But God was on our side because there was a small technicality. Nancy had filed her case late. And because she had filed her case late, we were going to cling onto that thread as a technicality and hope that the judge would agree with us. So anyway, we went to court. And on that day, Nancy was there, looking all smug and defiant. She gave her evidence. See, for her, it was not just personal, but it was also business. She was going to get a lot of money. James also gave his evidence, and it was sad. He recounted the events of the day as he was called to the hospital, as he discovered that his wife had passed away. In fact, it was such a difficult case because he got emotional, he broke down. We had to adjourn the hearing for about 30 minutes. Anyway, after the hearing ended, we agonized over what to do. There was really no defense as such, except for that little technicality. And so, when we submitted our case, we harped on that technicality. And on the day of judgment, I remember we waited outside the judge's chambers. I pulled Nancy's lawyer aside and I asked him to be kind, because I knew the minute the judgment was delivered, there'd be auctioneers at James's house. And sure enough, when we went into court, I could not believe my ears when I heard the judge deliver his judgment and say that he agreed with us. They had not brought evidence of the fact that they had been allowed to file their case outside the time required. The case was dismissed. Just like that. Because of that technicality. And then I realized this was personal. It was not just about business. And that is what happens when it is personal. So what am I saying? Sometimes you can be in a career, and many times people look at lawyers and think, oh, they make a lot of money, and so it's all about business. But there are those cases and instances where it's not just business, but personal. And there are many people, not just in the legal profession, but in any other career, where you have that one day where you do a task and you say, this is not about business, it's not about the amount of money I am making, but that this is personal. And if you ever have any of those days, then you know you're in the right place. Thank you very much.